And that's their new Christmas record. We wish you Merry Christmas, war is over. Get yours now. Thank you.
Is there such a record?
Yes, he made it after he was on the show.
Was George Harrison as calm as the public image he once portrayed? You might be surprised to know that he did not hesitate to bluntly criticize some famous artists in the music industry. Who were the names that made Harrison uncomfortable to the point of outright hating? And what was the reason behind those shocking comments? Don't miss the little-known revelations about this legend's blunt and thorny side in today's video. Neil Young, George Harrison, the Beatles' most spiritual and level-headed icon, was not always silent on opposing musical views. One of the most notable examples was his fraught and outspoken relationship with rock legend Neil Young. Although both were revered in the music world, Harrison was never shy about making his dislike of Young clear. During a 1992 recording session with Dave Stewart, Bob Geldof and Chucho Merchan, Harrison openly expressed his displeasure with Young. When listening to Around the World, he commented bluntly, "I'm not a Neil Young fan. Hate him. I can't stand him." Harrison wasn't just saying it, he insisted that what he was most allergic to was Young's guitar playing and vocals. Harrison, known for his technical guitar playing and delicate note selection, was annoyed by Young's free-spirited, emotional, and sometimes chaotic playing style. He mocked Young's one-string playing, calling it a joke, and did not hesitate to replicate it in the studio to prove his point. The contrast in musical philosophies was clear. Harrison pursued refinement and balance. Young favored roughness and instinct. Not stopping at technique, Harrison also criticized Young's singing, albeit with a touch of self-mockery. "I like some of his melodies, but I can't stand his voice, even more than my own." The remark, while humorous, showed Harrison's genuine annoyance with his colleague. Interestingly, during that recording session, Bob Geldof tried to defend Neil Young, but Harrison stood his ground. His attitude was not impulsive. It was consistent on many occasions, including the 1992 Bob Dylan 30th anniversary concert, Bobfest, where Harrison and Young performed together. When he heard Young's solo, Harrison whispered to Eric Clapton, "What's going on?" To which he replied sarcastically, "Don't look at me. It's not me." Despite their artistic disagreements, however, Harrison remained professional and polite. He called Young a good guy but said bluntly, "I never liked him musically." This was a classic example of Harrison's ability to differentiate between the person and the work. He could disagree with someone's art without disrespecting them as individuals. The irony is that Neil Young had a lot of affection for the Beatles. In a 1975 Rolling Stone interview, he recalled the first Beatles songs he performed in public, calling them the defining moments of his life. In 1999, Young inducted Paul McCartney into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and performed with him on several occasions thereafter. Unlike Harrison, McCartney appreciated Young's talent, a marked difference within the Beatles. Even John Lennon criticized Young's "Hey Hey, My Might" Into the Black in 1980, saying the lyrics promoted self-destruction. This shows that, even among top artists, musical taste is personal and controversial. Ultimately, George Harrison's criticism of Neil Young came not from spite, but from deep artistic disagreement. They remind us that, even among legends, disagreement is perfectly normal, and that, sometimes that's what makes music so diverse. As George Harrison's honest criticism of Neil Young shows, even among legends, artistic disagreements are common. And in the 1990s, the music world witnessed another confrontation, but this time between two younger and more fiery forces. Oasis. Ironically, George Harrison and Oasis, the band once considered the spiritual descendants of the Beatles, had one of the most famous feuds in modern rock history. Once a great inspiration to Oasis, Harrison was not shy about criticizing them. He considered their music copycat and lacking in depth, lacking any innovation. In a 1996 interview with Independent Radio News, he bluntly stated, "They simply copied the Beatles' sound, but didn't add anything different or original." In a 1997 interview with Le Figaro, Harrison was even skeptical about the band's longevity. "Will anyone remember U2 in 30 years? I doubt it. The Spice Girls? I doubt it." The question was also taken as a reference to Oasis, implying that they would be unlikely to have the same lasting impact as the Beatles. Harrison took a particular swipe at Liam Gallagher, the frontman with his brash style and controversial lifestyle. Using words he rarely used to describe a bandmate, He's a burden, an anachronism, and a nuisance. I feel sorry for him. The band was better off without him. In a French documentary, Derrière le miroir, Behind the Mirror, Harrison even suggested that Noel Gallagher, the main songwriter, was the reason Oasis existed. Noel writes the songs, he's fine. The rest of them are miserable. I doubt they need him. This criticism was echoed throughout the music press. It culminated in Harrison saying of Liam, he missed the bus of his time. The cold, bitter remark reflected his deep disappointment with an artist who was supposed to be the spiritual heir to rock and roll. Liam's response? Unsurprisingly aggressive and very Liam. On MTV in 1996, he declared, if any old man has a problem with me, he should put down his walker and get on the floor and I'll give them a good right hook. Liam did admit, however, to his love of Harrison's music. I admire the Beatles and George Harrison as a musician, but he's a fucking nipple. If I met him, I'd say it. Unlike his brother, Noel Gallagher was more subdued. He defended Liam and expressed his respect for Harrison. He's never met Liam. If he's just reading the papers and judging him, he's got it all wrong. George, we all admire you. The irony is that Oasis's 1995 hit Wonderwall was named after Harrison's debut solo album. Despite being heavily influenced by the Beatles, Oasis were despised by their idols. Harrison never forgave those who paid tribute to him for the sake of imitation. Even Paul McCartney once criticized Oasis, calling them young, arrogant, and pretentious. However, he softened his tone in later years, admitting that Oasis wrote great tunes, although he still considered their claim to be bigger than the Beatles to be the kiss of death. Noel, meanwhile, once said that Paul McCartney was the only person who ever walked into the Oasis dressing room and got a standing ovation. The respect for a legend was always there, even though the criticism left many cracks. George Harrison died in 2001, disgruntled with Oasis and never having the chance to face Liam as he had challenged him. The clash between the two generations of artists. One who pioneered modern rock, the band that arrogantly wanted to continue that legacy, remains one of the most interesting and complex battles in British music history. Were the Beatles contemporaries as supportive of each other as they are often thought? Not necessarily. The Hollies, one of the most prominent pop rock groups of the 1960s, were at times a source of controversy for their outspoken criticisms of not only the younger generation, but also the Beatles. The Hollies, George Harrison and the Hollies' rivalry was one of British rock's most surprising. Harrison's feud with the Hollies began in December 1965 over their cover of If I Needed Someone. Unlike his critiques of other bands, it was quick. The tension started on December 3, 1965, when the Beatles released Rubber Soul and the Hollies covered Harrison's If I Needed Someone. Harrison loudly criticized their portrayal, ruining a lovely homage from one British band to another. Harrison mostly criticized the Hollies' music. Harrison abruptly looked away from the mirror when questioned about the Hollies' version in an interview with New Musical Express journalist Alan Smith, and strongly denied writing the song for them. It's not my music, he snarled. I think their approach is bad. They ruined it. His critique extended beyond his song's interpretation. Harrison commented on their music. The Hollies are terrific. Their songs sound like session men who met in a studio without knowing each other. Certainly technically sound. That's it. This criticism hurt because it criticized the band's relationship and honesty, not just their technique. Harrison may have disliked the recording method because of fundamental differences. The Beatles took several takes and had greater studio freedom under George Martin, while the Hollies arrived at Abbey Road Studios well-rehearsed and recorded singles like Bus Stop. And Harrison's critique hurt the Hollies because of its time. His public criticisms halted their song at number 20 in the British charts, disappointing compared to their prior releases. EMI, the record label representing both bands, would have been unhappy with this commercial impact, which escalated the conflict. Harrison's harshest statement against the Hollies came in a December 1965 interview. I hate their approach. They ruined it. This frank appraisal set the conflict's tone. His rebuttal went further. The Hollies are all right musically, but the way they do their records, they sound like session men who've just got together in a studio without ever seeing each other before. This comment explicitly criticized their band's solidarity, which was particularly harsh for a group famed for their close harmonies. Graham Nash led the Hollies' response to Harrison's criticism. Nash said, "Not only do these comments disappoint and hurt us, but we're sick and tired of everything the Beatles say or do being taken as law. This comment showed the Beatles' dominance over other British bands. Nash asked Harrison, if we have made such a disgusting mess of his brainchild song, will he give all the royalties from our record to charity? This response skillfully showed that Harrison would benefit from a version he openly criticized. Nash reacted strongly to Harrison's criticism of their music. What he meant by sounding like session men is that our albums lack soul. Rubbish. We've never claimed to be soul R&B. Despite the conflicts, Nash maintained admiration for the Beatles' music. I still like the Beatles. I still enjoy them, and I won't say ridiculous things like, I'm gonna burn all their albums in my collection. No, I enjoy their music. However, insulting us is ridiculous. The public supported the Hollies in this argument. Mick Foxcroft said, New Musical Express. Comparing the two versions, I find that the drumming of Bobby Elliott is far better than that of Mr. Starr, and the Hollies' vocal harmony is superior to the Beatles. Linda Marks, another reader, supported the group. George Harrison ran down the Hollies. They sound excellent, the Hollies. Fortunately, the dispute subsided. Paul McCartney's appreciation of Nash's high voice on I Can't Let Go supposedly improved things. The Hollies appeared on Beatles radio shows and Christmas specials, implying a professional reunion. In his 2013 autobiography, Wild Tales of Rock and Roll Life, Nash wrote, in those days, tweaking a Beatle was like blaspheming the Pope. Every English group owed him a huge debt, but I had no intention of kissing their asses. This shows that Harrison's criticism affected Nash emotionally throughout his career, even after the public tension dissipated. Is there any band that openly defied the standards set by the Beatles? The answer is yes, and that band is the Sex Pistols. The legendary punk band not only took Britain by storm in the late 70s, but also had no qualms about criticizing the Beatles, who they considered too polished and out of touch. Sex Pistols, George Harrison, unlike many of his contemporaries, was open about his dislike of punk rock, particularly the Sex Pistols. The quiet Beatle lamented punk's late 1970s musical limitations in a startling manner. Harrison disliked the Sex Pistols for their musical incompetence. Harrison told Rolling Stone in 1979, as far as musicianship goes, the punk bands were just rubbish. No finesse in the drumming. Just a lot of noise and nothing. The Sex Pistols' raw, unrefined sound symbolized everything Harrison opposed musically after years of practice. Harrison favored melody and good musicianship. Whereas punk highlighted technical skilllessness, he slammed punk drummers for lacking the skill and grace of early rock and roll. Harrison disagreed with punk philosophy. He was extremely spiritual and optimistic, therefore punk's nihilism clashed with him. Harrison felt that love and kindness should solve social issues rather than wrath and devastation. Harrison's Sex Pistols and punk rock comments are notable for their candor. I couldn't stand punk rock. It never did anything for me at all. Yeah, but those guys were inventing something at the time. Me and I don't think punk was inventing anything except negativity. His 1979 Rolling Stone interview was maybe his most revealing. I felt awful when the Sex Pistols were on TV. And one of them said, we're schooled to go into the factories and work on assembly lines. And that's their destiny. England is often depressed, so it's doubly sad that it came from there. Harrison's most intellectual critique was punk's passionate response to social issues. Negativity doesn't fight negativity. Love must overcome hatred, not more hatred. Ironically, Harris criticized the Sex Pistols but understood punk's social roots. He called the education of British youngsters for labor manufacturing occupations awful, and noted their poor employment prospects. Harrison had amazing privilege. He acknowledged the gap. How do you offer them money without it? Working harder is the only way to earn more. That may be okay since I don't work in a factory, but it's true. Harrison's experience is very different from working class punk teens. Harrison lived in a 20-room home in 1979, when Britain endured economic turbulence, widespread unemployment, and labor strikes during the winter of discontent. Harrison's critique focused on the musical philosophy's generational difference. He promoted love to oppose negativity, reflecting his 1960s idealism, while the Sex Pistols represented a generation disillusioned with such ideas. They found Harrison's spiritual remedies unrelated to their terrible circumstances. And who will be the last name? A legend of stained glass. feathers, and timeless ballads, but also once considered by Harrison to be too flashy and no longer musical. No one expected that on the list of artists that George Harrison disliked, there would be Elton John. George Harrison disliked Elton John's music despite working with him on several albums. Harrison's strict musical standards, even with performers he admired, were shown in their interesting relationship of professional respect and personal evaluation. Harrison mostly criticized Elton John's formulaic music. Harrison told India Today in 1976, "I've never considered Elton John's music. I suppose he wrote a nice song years ago, but it all sounds the same." This firing wasn't lighthearted. Harrison criticized Elton's songwriting. "His music is made to a formula. Throw in lyrics, throw in 4 chords, shake well, and there it is. New Elton John super hit." Harrison, who prized spirituality and musical invention, thought Elton's economic success sacrificed creative uniqueness. Harrison understood Elton's celebrity struggles despite his harsh criticism. Harrison felt pity for Elton while criticizing his music. "Elton John is the sole Beatles associate, and I feel sad for him. Fame and wealth matter little." Harrison believed that commercial prosperity without spiritual contentment was meaningless. Harrison expressed his view on Elton John's music with numerous famous quotes. "I've never considered his music much. Everything sounds alike. His music is made to a formula. Throw in lyrics, throw in 4 chords. Shake well, and there it is, the new Elton John super hit. Elton John is the only one who's come close to the Beatles, and I feel sad for him. Fame and wealth matter little." Perhaps most importantly, Harrison advised Elton on his substance usage difficulties, beyond musical criticism. Later, Elton said, "He administered quite a few tellings off to me about my drug problem." This intervention shows that Harrison cared for Elton enough to confront his self-destructive conduct despite his musical judgments. Harrison's critique of Elton John is typical of his candor. Harrison criticized Elton's lack of creativity and depth, as he did Neil Young's voice and Oasis's unoriginal sound. Harrison's criticism of Elton John is particularly paradoxical considering their business connection. Harrison worked with Elton more than with Neil Young or Oasis. Harrison's 1987 album Cloud 9 included Elton on piano on 3 tracks: Cloud 9, Devil's Radio, and Wreck of the Hesperus. This collaboration shows a more complicated connection than animosity. Elton recognized this complexity in Rolling Stone's Remembering George, writing, "George was always quite friendly to me. I recall staying up until recording and asking him to perform Here Comes the Sun. He did, and it was fantastic. I feel blessed to have performed on his recordings and known him." In the same homage, Elton acknowledged Harrison's bluntness as part of his character. There were some curmudgeonly band comments, but again, he was honest. Nothing was held back. Do you agree with George Harrison's unpleasant views? If so, who are the artists you can't stand? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more interesting updates. Thank you, and see you in the next videos.